Hi everyone. I thought it might be interesting to spend a few moments and tell you a little bit about a new aspect of Power Scout hockey that we just released yesterday, and that's our trade maker model. As far as we know, no one has ever attempted to try to take all the existing data and try to develop a model that mathematically expresses the way a trade might have turned out if we could measure it. What I want to do here with this video blog is explain a little bit of the thinking that went into the development of the trade maker model, so you get a little more comfortable about the results that you're going to get whenever you try to transact a trade. I want to do this in three sections. The first, I want to talk about the methodology that we used. Then I want to talk about the output. And then I want to spend the third little piece on interpretation and how to understand the results that we actually get, because there's some nuances to the results that I think you should be aware of. What we did here is look at trades from the perspective of a general manager, not as a fan, but as a general manager. How would he look at making a trade? And it calls for a little bit of thinking and a little bit of assumption making, because you're faced with situations like this. If Sidney Crosby, a #1 center in Pittsburgh, is traded for the 6th best defenseman on the weakest team, we can't just substitute one for the other and say that's what the outcome of the trade would be. Because Crosby being traded for a defenseman does not mean he goes and plays defense on the second team, and vice versa, the defenseman is now the #1 center. No, what the general manager would look at, he would say Sidney Crosby's the #1 center, and when he goes to the other team, if he was coming to my team, at worst he would be my second line center, and in time probably my first line center, depending on who that person was. So what we did to bring that to a mathematical sense is we ranked all the various players by position and created a core lineup, what we call a core lineup, which is the 4 centers, the 8 wingers, and the 6 defensemen, and 2 goalies, that best represented the team. And we put in a minimum requirement that they had to have a certain amount of ice time, which was 5 minutes per game played by the team. And as well, we ranked them from highest to lowest by position after they qualified for on the ice time criteria. We ranked them from highest to lowest using max. Now you might ask why we use the max rating. Well, the reason is because we could have used the scoring race points, but we know that general managers don't use the scoring race points to make trades, because they trade for 6 best defensemen and pay good dollars for those players. So there's some value there that the general manager sees that we're not going to capture if we just use points in the system, and that player would rank much lower than what the general manager in real life would place them at. We could have used dollars as well, and dollars are a criteria that general managers like to take into account because of the salary cap. But they don't trade just on the basis of dollars. They might say they want to get rid of some dollars so they can fit under the salary cap, but they also take into account the players they're going to get for the dollars that they're going to save. So it all comes back to the players. And so the max rating seemed to be the best way to approximate the way a general manager would look at the team. So what we did is we compare now similar ranked players by position, centers to centers, wingers to wingers, and so on. And we use the difference in max as our proxy for how much better the team is in terms of talent. And once we know that, we because of the way the Power Scout system works, we also now know points in the standings. So those two things, the max difference and point shares, gives us how much better off each of the teams are as a result of the trade taking place. Now there's something else that our output shows, and that's hits and block shots. Both of these are important to winning. And hits is a proxy for toughness. If you saw one of the earlier videos, I talk about the skills that each of the statistics represents, and certainly hits was identified with toughness. Block shots are identified with commitment or desire. How badly do you want to play to win? And that's a skill that not everybody has. Now, to compare that, we can't just use the raw data. We have to get it on a per minute played basis so that we're comparing players in terms of the rate at which they get these particular statistics. And on our website, if you go to the players section, you'll see a little tab there that says 60-minute equivalent. That is the rating of the player for these characteristics based on 60 minutes of ice time as opposed to on a per minute basis. It's the per minute times 60 essentially. And the third little area of output we call salary. And in this case, we use the salary paid by the general manager, not necessarily the cap salary. And the reason we did that, we wanted to measure the general manager on the basis of how he valued the player on when he structured the contract, and not the creativity he might have used to try to get under the cap. In other words, if you remember the Kovalchuk trade with New Jersey this past summer, you'll realize that was creative, a creative salary as opposed to an average salary over the course of the contract. So the methodology was to look at the general manager look at the lineup from the point of view of the general manager, and then to look at the output on the basis of 7 main factors. Now, that led us to the interpretation. In this case, the first thing that pops up on that right-hand side of the TradeMaker model is something called who wins the trade. And that's the output. And that explains the trade on the basis of the rankings and the comparison of players into similar positions on the other roster. First of all, let's look at team points. Most trades, you're not going to see an awful lot of change in team points because we're not trading Sidney Crosby for a fourth-line center as a rule. We're trading Sidney Crosby for a group of other players who offset some of the advantages that Crosby has. Because general managers, together, they're the 30 best people probably that can analyze trade value, and therefore they're not going to be entering into trades where there's a great deal of difference. But what's important to see is whether it's a plus or a negative, because a plus sign indicates that the team, of course, is going to get better, but it also might be indicating that the team might, through improvement in other areas, even enjoy a better advantage in the standings that may not be just expressed as a result of the trade. So whether the team is plus or negative in terms of points in the standings, either over the year or for the balance of the season, that's worth looking at. The second thing you got to remember is who are the players in the trade. One of the most important elements of rating players under the Power Scout system is experience. In other words, it's games played. And it only holds for 2 positions, center and defense. It's not as pronounced at the wing position, and it's not really a major consideration over there. But when a trade is made and you see that the center and a defenseman are involved, the thing you want to look at is how many games played has the player had. Because if either one or all of them are less than 400 games played, they're going to get better just through sheer playing time. The more games they play, the better they become, because they become more experienced. In fact, the most important position on the ice where experience comes into play is defense. And we've estimated, and our researchers found, that for every 120 games that a defenseman plays, everything else being even, the team is 1 point better off in the standings. That's why when you have a bunch of defensemen that are very, very young and haven't played much, that's why those teams have trouble winning, and why there's so many mistakes made on defense. They're learning. And it takes, according to our research, up to game 400 before that happens. So when a trade is made, even though you may not see as much in the results section of the trade, if the center and the defense are young or relatively inexperienced NHLers, you can expect them to improve just through that factor alone. So that may explain who's going to win the trade in the longer term. The other thing is on hits and block shots, what we want to see is the percent change. Because in some cases, teams will give up toughness and in order to get a an advantage in the salary area, and likewise, a team can take on a lot of toughness for very little cost if they can get the right players. So it's the percent change on hits and block shots, the players that are involved, the center and defenseman in particular, and the team points, whether it's plus or negative. And those are the three main factors. And then the final factor that is looked at is salary. And as I said, that's not a cap salary at this time. It's the actual average salary that the general manager pays. And when you see it, you can, whether it's plus or negative, you will get a better idea of whether the general managers are attempting to clear their cap space and make room for these players, or maybe for other players. So that's the trade maker model in simple terms, and we're really pleased with it. We've done some beta testing with it, and we've been getting trades that we feel are appropriate for the players that we've put into it. But of course, there's an infinite number of combinations, and that's where we're hopeful you can come in and give us some direction on and some information on how you value the trade. So we certainly welcome any thoughts and any comments you might have.